So hey guys, what's up? So welcome to my news channel. So starting from the first news, how to tackle India's current acceleration. Humanity remains one of the fastest growing countries in the world, and the unmistakable slowdown of the economic growth has taken hold in India. While ministers in the central government emphasize the former, they are left to admit the latter. India's real gross domestic product at market price grew year by year at 3.89%, 6.39%, 7.41%, 8%, 8.17%, 7.17%, and 6.81% since the 2012 and 2013. The corresponding yield change in the annual growth is 2.49%, 1.02%, and minus 0.36% since the 2013 to 2014. The slowdown in economic growth has measured by the growth rate of the real GDP started in 2016 to 2017. If we instead use the real gross value added as basic prices as the measure of the aggregate economic activity, which differs from the GDP by net product taxes, we get a similar picture. The annual growth rate of real GVABP has been 6.05% and 6.63% since 2012 to 2013. Hence, the deceleration in the aggregate economic activity is visible since the 2015 to 2016. A year before that, indicated by real GDP with the growth rate by changing by minus 0.15%, minus 0.95%, and minus 0.30% over the last 3 years. One can just approach this data on the economic performance with forecasts coming from a wide range of sources. According to Reserve Bank of India, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and a host of other private agencies, the growth rate of India's output is expected to slow down further in 2019 to 2020. Taken together, all this information makes it impossible to deny that India's economy has entered acceleration mode. The current acceleration in India's economic growth is unprecedented in the terms of its duration. In the last 20 years, the growth rate of GDP over GVABP has never declined continuously for more than 2 years. The only time the annual growth rate of both the GDP and GVABP has fallen for 2 years in a row was in 2011 to 2012 and 2012 to 2013. But both growth rates had recovered sharply thereafter. The continuous decline in growth rates translated into large potential losses of output and income. If it had grown between 2016 to 2017 and 2018 to 2019 at the same rate that it grew in the previous 4 years, real GVABP and real GDP would have been 0.93% and 0.54% higher respectively in 2018 and 2019. If the corresponding counterfactual growth rates were the past actual mean growth rates of the past 12 years, then real GVABP and real GDP would have been about 1.75% and 1.11% higher respectively in the 2018 to 2019 than their actual values. The timing of the acceleration suggests an explanation of its causes, a combination of 4 negative shocks. 2 of these shocks are policy induced, a third is the result of slow changes in policy to rapid changes, and the fourth is of external origin, largely outside the control of domestic policy actors. The first negative shock was generated by demonetization in November 2016. The sudden policy move to ban high denomination currency, which comprised 86% of all currency circulation, had a large negative impact on the level of economic activity. A recent study by Geeta Gopinath and co-authors find that the cumulative impact on demonetization led to contraction in bank credit and output by 2% points each. They also find that the negative shock works itself out in few months. By the time the economy had emerged, if at all, from the negative shock of demonetization, the government introduced another policy that was to have an even bigger impact, the goods and service tax, the GST. The second negative shock came into effect in July 27, and according to many commentators, policymakers, and economists, it has massive negative impact on the level of economic activity. The negative impact does not only rise to the problems of implementation, but comes from structural reasons related to its negative impact on the formal sector. As has been argued perceptually by Arun Kumar, the third shock emanates from the financial system. Since the early part of this decade, that shadow banking sector, which is a part of financial system that is effectively outside the regulatory purview of the monetary authorities, have been growing rapidly. This growth was the result of the long-standing problem of the NPAs in the formal banking sector, which slowed down credit growth from the formal financial sector. The growth of shadow banking sector has been the following. Some of the credit finance, consumption expenditure that shore up the growth over the past few years. But its operation also increased the financial fragility of the system due to the inherent maturity mismatch of the assets and liabilities. The deep problems of the shadow banking sector came to the fore with the IMF crisis in September 2018. The crisis in this sector continues as the problems in DHFL in 2019 highlight and has resulted in generating the third negative shock, a sharp contraction in credit growth. This has translated into a cutback in consumption expenditure, which has now shown up a severe slowdown in the automobile, real estate, cement and other related sector. The final shock comes from the slowdown in the global economy. Growth has been tepid in the global economy since 2012. This has reduced the contribution to the external sector to India's real GDP growth since 2014 to 2015 and turned negative in 2017 to 2018. While the negative contribution of net exports less imports since 2017 to 2018 is clearly a causal factor behind the current deceleration. It is important to overemphasize the external shock. India's growth process has largely relied on internal sources of demand. In the past 20 years, net exports has contributed negatively to growth in 11 years. In the years of roaring growth between 2003 to 2004 and 2007, the contribution of net exports were mostly negative, but the growth in internal sources of demand managed to contract the negative impacts coming from the external economy. To counteract the current acceleration, therefore, policymakers need to boost the domestic demand in the short run and reverse the investment decline in the medium run. A combination of three policy moves can form part of an effective strategy to combat the acceleration. Increase wages in Manrega, which would increase in rural demand, increasing the disposal for food subsidy, which would make room in the budgets of the poor households from non-food expenditure, and address India's observer record on the Hunter Index, and boosting public investment, especially in agriculture and infrastructure, which would kickstart the investment cycle and ease supply constraint. They are much more effective methods of increasing demand than reducing taxes on corporate income. So move to the next news. New oil field found with over 15 barrels, says Iran President Hassan Rouhani. Iran has discovered a new oil field in the country's south with an estimated 50 billion barrels of crude oil. Its president said Sunday have found that could boost the country's proven reserve by a third as it struggles to sell energy abroad over U.S. sanctions. The announcement by Hassan Rouhani comes as Iran faces crushing American sanctions after the U.S. pulled out of its nuclear deal with world powers last year. Rouhani made the announcement Sunday in a speech in the desert city of Yezd. He said the field was located in Iran's southern coastal and province, home to its crucial oil industry. That's 50 billion barrels will be added to Iran proven reserve of some 150 billion. Proven reserve are those that are commercially able to extract. The new oil field could be Iran's second largest field after one containing 65 barrels in hours. So move to the next news. Australia battles bushfire prepares for catastrophic conditions. Australian firefighters raced on Sunday to contain widespread bushfires that have left 3 people dead and warned of catastrophic fire conditions ahead, including around the country's biggest city of Sydney. Authorities upgraded the forecast for the Greater Sydney region to catastrophic fire danger on Tuesday, the first time the city has been rated at that level since new fire danger rating was introduced in 2009. High temperatures, strong winds and low humidity are forecast, making conditions dangerous. The New South Wales State Rural Fire Service said in a statement conditions on Tuesday in the Greater Hunter region north of Sydney were also rated as catastrophic. The highest level of bushfire danger, while extreme or severe conditions were predicted for other parts of the state. If a fire starts and takes hold during catastrophic fire danger conditions, live and live homes will be at risk. The statement said Australia is suffering from one of the worst bushfire seasons, which is occurring even before the start of the southern hemisphere summer. With parts of the country crippled by severe drought, 3 people have died in New South Wales since Friday, when a record number of emergency level fires were declared in the state and at least 150 homes have been destroyed. 5 people were listed by authorities as missing on Sunday afternoon, but local media said that Sunday night have been accounting for. But Sunday afternoon, about half of the more than 70 fires burning in New South Wales were still not under control, with 2 burning at an emergency level. Education authorities said more than 40 schools in New South Wales could be shut down on Monday due to the fires. Furthermore, north in Queensland, more than 50 fires were burning on Sunday, with emergency warning in place for 2 fires. Thousands of residents in Queensland have been evacuated, and authorities have warned several fire danger were expected on Wednesday. And with little reprieve this year, there's really no rainfall, no significant rainfall until at least the end of the year, possibly into the new year. Queensland Fire Emergency Services Acting Commissioner Mike Wasing told the news conference on Sunday. So move to the last news. Injured problem forces Singapore bound plane to make emergency landing. The Asian Airlines Airbus 350 plane took off from Incheon in South Korea with about 310 passengers on board and landing in Manila after one of its injured planes, the spokesman said on Sunday. An airport operating by the South Korean line bound for Singapore made an emergency landing in Manila late on Sunday due to the engine problem. The Asian airline Airbus 350 plane took off in from Incheon in South Korea about 3 on board and landed in Manila after one of the injured planes.